Hello, and welcome to The Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Canadian Story. I'm quite excited about this episode. Melissa Lantsman, who I have worked in similar circles with for probably my whole professional life. We've crossed paths maybe 100, 200 times over the years, is running in a nomination in Thornhill to become the, hopefully, next MP for Thornhill. But she has, like myself, basically dedicated her life to the Conservative movement and has some really cool ideas of where we need to go. So without further ado, we'll ask you to just give a 30-second background on kind of your bio, and then we'll go right into it.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And, a quick bio. I like you, I've worked in this movement my entire life to put forward the Conservative cause. I've been in every national war room, spent a little bit of time working on provincial campaigns. I've worked in the Harper government. And now what I do is almost politics adjacent. We get to run a very cool PR and government relations shop where you're still in it, but you're kind of out of it. I sit on a lot of boards. I've been a community activist. I've raised a lot of money for causes that I care about. And now I'm taking that next step and trying to become the MP from Thornhill.
You're becoming a public servant. You have served public servants for a long time, just as I have, but now that is probably, I would think, given you a very clear understanding of what it takes to do the job. But you haven't just gone staffer to MP. You went out and, built a career for yourself as well, which I find very admirable. But let's go into the first question, which is, what do you love about this country? What about this country just sets your soul on fire?
Well, the answer's simple for me. I'm a kid of immigrants. They came here just under 45 years ago, and they came here from a regime that was way worse to them than this country could ever be on its worst day. And frankly, the opportunity, the fact that if you work hard and you do everything right, that you can get ahead. And in just less than one generation, they're going to be able to see their kid, a first-generation Canadian, run for Parliament. Hopefully, if I win this nomination.
Yeah. Well, the nominations are back alley knife fights, so it'll be
family fights are hard.
Family fights are very hard. I've managed about 12 of them now, and I would say it's in some ways my favorite kind of politics, and in other ways my absolute least favorite, because it's definitely the dirtiest, I would say, form of politics. Just because it becomes so personal, right?
It is personal, but it's also, it's also the ground floor of democracy, and it allows our members to really think about what we need and what we need to go forward. And so sort of sometimes the obvious choice, the next in line, is not necessarily what we need or what we're looking for.
Well, this is actually something that I think about a lot, and I mention Rome a lot on this podcast, but that's because I'm a history-obsessed nerd. But Rome was great because it allowed for competition to decide its leaders, right? It wasn't I'm talking about the Roman Republic, obviously. And I think sometimes we lose that in Canadian politics, and we just think, oh, no, you have to earn your place. Well, what if someone comes along who would be ideal? Why wouldn't we pick them instead of just, oh, they haven't earned their stripes? Well, age is not really the determinant of leadership ability, right? I've
seen that across the country for sure. The good thing about Canada, in comparison to just our neighbors to the south, is, frankly, you don't have to have a family crest. You didn't have to be here for an entire generation. Your family's name doesn't have to be in the building of one of the oldest universities to actually make it in politics. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it's a lot of reasons that this country and our system is, frankly, if I didn't believe this, then I shouldn't be running, is the best country in the world.
Yeah, and it really, really is. And, we're going through a rough time right now, and there's a lot of angry people, and I want to speak to you about that, especially a lot of angry conservatives who feel that they're not being listened to and there's no one there to represent them, right? And particularly back home where I come from in Alberta, there's a lot of anger, but it's in rural Ontario, it's as if there are different rules for different people here. But at the end of the day, we have a great country, and we should never, just because we have some criticisms doesn't mean that we should start disliking the country, right?
Absolutely. Look, this is, of course, we can talk about this forever, but it is a difficult time. It's probably the most difficult time in my lifetime for so many that I know, not only from a health crisis perspective, but the economic crisis that we're now in, and frankly in for the next 8 to 18 months, and figuring out how to dig a hole out. But the ingenuity in this country, and the people that have built this country, the people who have come here and become workers and become Canadians, there is really nothing we can't handle. We might just have a different view about how we get to the end of the road. Ours is different than maybe the liberal point of view. But at the end of the day, I don't think that there's anyone in politics, or frankly, anyone who lives here that doesn't believe in our ability to be great.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, except with one caveat: is I think we need to start believing it more. Right? Like, I feel like we're maybe too shy about how great this country is, which is, the whole purpose of this podcast. But, like, for example, one of the reasons I love the Conservative Party is that we actually do have a diversity of opinions within it. And I'd like you to speak to that, because you're, I would say, the vanguard of what the future of conservatism, you and people like yourself are pushing the boundaries in people's minds of what it means to be a conservative, because people like yourself and I have realized the values of conservatism have very little to do with the way that they're painted from the outside.
Sure. And, it's different. It's different people from different walks of life. We look different. But to your first point, I wouldn't want to be part of a party that didn't accept the different views, which I think is every other political party on the Canadian spectrum. I want people to talk about the hard issues on the floor of the House of Commons. They were elected to do that. And, kicking things to the courts, or frankly, just putting them under the rug because we don't want to have hard conversations, that's not what this country is about.
Yes.
In terms of conservative politics, I've never been shy about espousing conservative values. I've done so on radio, on TV, and I'm oftentimes outnumbered. But if we bring that message in a more accessible way to more people from more walks of life, they will come on board.
And could you give us, like, I don't know, a 4 or 5 minute summary of what you think it means to be a conservative?
Oh, well, there's a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, we want a government that's responsible, that's transparent, that spends money the way that you and I would in our homes, not more than we have, or, leverage ourselves into debt. We want a conservative party that talks in conservative ways about the environment, because there's no conservative I've ever met that doesn't want cleaner lakes, that doesn't want cleaner air, and that doesn't want more parks. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about the issues that maybe we've been pushed away from frankly, by a liberal party, or the parties on the left in this country that have just eaten up the share of voice on this. We shouldn't be afraid to have hard conversations about our social values, or hard conversations, about family values. I think that this pandemic, and I will say this, it has shown us that maybe things don't work as well as they should.
Yeah, it really has shown us that, hasn't it?
And maybe government doesn't have their act together on everything, but at the end of the day, the biggest problem with this is that we've starved our civil society institutions. We've starved our churches, our synagogues, our charities out of people not being able to give what they usually give, because, well, obviously we're in a circumstance. And what that allows for is to make government bigger. For government to step into the places where it has no business being in. And so, what it means to be conservative, it is frankly making your own decisions, the decisions for your family, and living in a world where government is not everything.
And it's not that we don't, I forget who said this, but it's not that we don't think government can do good things. Some conservatives don't think government can do things. I think that's BS. It's that we think government is trying to do too many things.
Yeah, well, when you do too many things, you're not particularly you're not particularly apt at doing them well, and you're overstretched. And I think that it speaks to a distrust of our private sector and of the human ingenuity in our society. Like, we want people to work, with government, not necessarily all for government.
Yes, yes.
We want them to work alongside government to bring the best solutions to Canadians. Because when government takes that all over, we kill things like competition. We kill things like attracting the best and the brightest and having young people stay here and start their businesses. We stop investment from everywhere, and we don't get on with the things that we need, like critical infrastructure and things that will actually move us forward.
Yeah, I want to go dig into that a little bit more, because one of the things that I often baffles me is this idea that government is somehow giving us money. I'm like, guys, it's your money.
The line that drives me the craziest in this, in the last number of months, or it's almost a year now, but we're borrowing so you don't have to.
Yeah. Oh, like, what a line.
It's complete nonsense. We are simply mortgaging the future. And I get it. It's been difficult. And I know that people needed supports, and people still need supports going forward. But there's got to be a better way of figuring out who those people are and distributing this in a way that is more responsible, that doesn't put us behind all of our allies in terms of our own economic recovery. We're just not talking about this.
I feel like we're hunting rats with a shotgun, right? We're like, oh yeah, we're just going to blow holes in everything because we're just a scattershot approach. Like, I am not worried about COVID. That's because I'm a young, relatively healthy person, right? But I am worried about vulnerable people in my life with COVID. And so I think the answer is protect the vulnerable people. Don't make me sit in my house all day.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with you. We know so much about this virus, and there could be a much less lazy and much more surgical approach to how we are functioning. But on this point, we've got to make sure that the solutions to our problems are not worse than the problems. And for every day that we are delayed in this magical vaccine rollout that may or may not happen, we have increased mental health issues. We've got emotional stress. We've got economic tarnish all over the country's businesses, big and small. We've got a higher rate of domestic abuse and addiction, and lots of untreated physical illnesses of people that are just terrified of going to a hospital. And so those are the things that are that we've got to look at going forward. That if we got away, or we got sort of through the first one, but if it happens again, we got to do this better.
Yes. And there's that funny phrase that's been going around, I guess Mark Carney and a few others, the build back better. And I actually like it, but the problem is we're not admitting how badly this has gone, right? This has been a catastrophic failure of public policy. And I don't actually, I blame it on a lack of leadership, but also I understand why the first time it happened. The second time makes no sense, right? Like, and you don't have to agree with me on that. This is my opinion, I guess. But I just find, why are people so afraid these days, do you think? Like, I feel like fear is the predominant sociological zeitgeist of emotion right now.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of fear, frankly, peddled, and some of it for good reason. Like you said earlier, we've got to protect the vulnerable. We've got to make sure that we have this thing, under control. On the Build Back Better, I don't disagree with it. I think it's a coined phrase that doesn't mean anything on the other side. I don't want to build back bigger or build back more. I want that to happen in a more natural way. I want people to stay here and start their businesses. I want other countries and multinationals to invest here. I want this a place where people feel like they can do business and have the certainty, without the regulation and without sort of going back on a project 14 times, that they can feel that Canada is a good place to park your money. And that we can all benefit from that. I don't think that's necessarily the job of government and government alone.
Well, I think government has to start getting out of the way a little bit. Like, we've got to the point where government is involved in every little thing that we do. One of the things that I'm more libertarian minded than most conservatives, I would say, but like, I just despise the fact that if I die, I get taxed. If I have a kid, I get taxed. If I have a dog, I get taxed. Every time I buy something, I get taxed. Every time I make money, I get taxed. It's like the level of taxation in this country for the benefits that we get seems a little bit absurd to me. Now, I understand I'm not against taxes, but I am getting to the point where it's like, at what point do we say maybe we could do this in a more productive way?
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with you. I don't think any conservative would disagree with it. One of the ways to attract, better talent and frankly more investment in this country is our tax rate. We've got the tools and levers to do more, to attract better, to be more productive. And I'm not certain that you are better off today than you were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And your taxes are higher.
So what is that? So yeah. So what? Why are we? I guess obviously you and I are partisans, but the data is pretty clear. The Canadian economy is not growing at a sustainable rate right now, for a better life.
No, and factors of opportunity, the things that maybe you can't really measure from StatsCan data, things like opportunity, things like affordability, things like getting ahead. I can't imagine, coming to this country like my parents did, 45 years ago, not having a language, being able to, to assimilate into Canadian society, learn the language, get a job. Like, that is so much harder today.
Yes.
And we've got to ask ourselves the question of, are we providing the same benefits that we did? And our people's children, our children, are the next generation, whatever that looks like, what are they going to do? Like, when can we start talking about, the future of work, streamlining, people into jobs that we need rather than ones that existed 20 years ago? When do we have conversations like that? Because that's what I want to be a part of.
I think we need to just start having them. That's kind of why I started this podcast. I'm like, I just think that we need to start having the conversations, and people are dying for it. Joe Rogan is bigger than CNN and Fox News probably combined in terms of listenership. And all he does is have conversations with interesting people. And I was like, why can't we do that here in Canada? And not only why can't we do it, we should do it. Like, the Canadian story is largely untold, and it is a good story. Like what you described, your parents moved here, basically had nothing, right? You are now one of the, leaders in the conservative movement. I was born in a town with 14 houses. Well, I wasn't born in a town of 14 houses, but I grew up in a town of 14 houses. At 23, I was getting on the Prime Minister's plane to go announce Marketing Freedom Day in Saskatchewan, if you remember that. I don't know if you remember that.
That's a great story.
Right? Yeah. Like, and we all, it's also a very conservative story, right? Conservatives value merit.
It's merit, it's hard work. But it also is, the country that's been created for us by people, who built it before us. They were really thoughtful about some things. You could be anybody and be able to go to one of the best universities in this country, or you can be anyone and be able to take, to learn a trade, or go to one of the best colleges in a city that is far away from you. There is a real equalizer here on those who are willing to work hard, and get ahead. And what we don't want is we don't want that to sort of dissipate and go away. And so we've got to focus on, are we ready for what the world looks like in 20 years? Like, we're talking 2050 plans here.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Let's go. Tell me what does it look like? What could Canada be?
You know what? Nobody's been, and to your point, nobody's been talking about a vision for Canada. They've been talking about, boutique tax credits and the nationalization of some new program, and all of these promises. Even if it's transit infrastructure, or if it's building the highway between this community and this community, all of those are sort of 4-year promises, and they're done in a vein of, well, we need to get elected and we need to sort of please this group and this group. And I'm not naive to the fact that politics is about that, but there's nobody that's talking about even 2030 unless it's raising our taxes to change the weather. That's the only time.
That is a line. That is a line. Raising that's what we're going to call this episode. Raising our taxes to change the weather.
This is what we're not talking about. I asked a friend of mine who has 3 young kids. He's about my age, and what do you think they're going to do when they grow up? And I have no idea. I have no idea what the world's going to look like. And the fact is that if reasonable thinking people are sort of lost, then are we ready as a country for what comes next? Or are we getting ready for something that was, and we're nostalgic about the past, and we somehow think we're going to bring it back? I want to be part of a conservative movement that looks at being ready for 2050.
Yes. That's the conservative movement I want to be a part of. That's the whole point, because I know that you have a Jewish background and I have an evangelical Christian background, so we share one half of a book, half of a holy book. And there's a line in it that I absolutely love in Isaiah where it says, or I think it's Isaiah, don't quote me on that, but it says, "Without vision, my people perish." And I can only think that that's kind of what's happening to Canada right now. Nobody is articulating hope. There's no hope. Like, what are we hoping for? That maybe we'll have a green revolution? Like, what is the goal of Canada? What's its purpose? And I submit that Canada could be the shining light on the hill that shows the entire world how we can live in harmony with one another. Not like I mentioned this on another podcast. Diversity is not a strength. Diversity causes conflict. Harmony is the strength you use to overcome diversity.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that line of thinking, but we could go, we can go more tactical, or we can go sort of bigger vision. And what I mean by tactical, are we getting our workforce ready for what comes next? Are our immigration, frankly, numbers and in the way in which we accept immigrants in this country, does it match the future of the workforce or where we want to go? Are the numbers high enough? Where is our place on the world stage? There's so many things to talk about, because I can't help to see over the last number of years, we've been on the wrong side of history more than we've been on the right. Yeah.
Look at China. Look at how wrong we were on China as a country. And I say that, we could criticize Trudeau, but the truth of the matter is a lot of people were pretty open to China
I think China's one of them. I think standing with our allies when it's principled and not always popular is the Canada that we want to be a part of. I question sort of the value of the multilateral, forums like the UN, dictated, frankly, just dictators and despots running the show, and we're clamoring, for a seat at the table. Well, that's not a table that.
Yeah, please let us be at the dictator's table.
But it's really understanding sort of where we are, what our values are, and espousing those on the world stage in a way that we can be proud of.
Yes. And okay, so let's go into maybe what you think that could look like.
Well, I mean, we can start. We can start with the domestic vision of Canada, and I want to be part of a government. I want the government to start talking about the what's next. I want them to start talking about what we're doing on the critical infrastructure front, what we're doing on on the taxes front, what we're doing to keep people working here, attracting the best and brightest and getting them ready for a workforce that we don't even know what it looks like yet, and attracting all kinds of investment from everywhere. We want an open door, policy in order to make our lives better here. Open door on business, of course. And then, on the international stage, we just talked about it. I don't want to be the laughing stock of the universe.
Yeah. Who would?
And I want to know that we've sort of done everything that we can as Canadians to, speak out against the atrocities, speak out against the human rights violations of some of the regimes that, frankly, we've cozied up with. I want us to know, clearly who our allies are. Increased trade, it's probably not a good time to talk about it during COVID, but open air agreements. Like, we are a trading nation, and the only way that we get bigger and we grow stronger is that if we open those up, and then we stand up when people aren't taking our grain or our pork or putting unbelievable tariffs on our steel. Like, we do have some muscle here, and
we need to start using it. Like, I've said this line a lot on the podcast. We need to save this country from timid men. And I've often thought that one of the biggest issues we face as a nation is just timidity. We're too quiet and unassuming, and we don't realize our own power.
Well, we could certainly run victory laps on everything that we've done that is good in the world. We can run victory laps out of the immense and tremendous amount of resources that we have within.
Oh, an abundance of resources unparalleled in human history.
Totally, and a vast Arctic that that is a strategic advantage for this country where few others have it. These are the things that we should be proud of. I remember in the Harper government. Let's go back to story time.
Go back to the good old days.
I was in the Department of Foreign Affairs for a long time, working with our Foreign Affairs Minister, and I remember it was like yesterday, where you sort of picked up the phone and you're like, well, how do I get the number for like the Arctic desk? Like, they haven't been called in forever.
Right.
And so you pick up the phone and you're like, hello, Arctic desk, like, you're up, you're on.
Yeah.
Centerfold of Canadian foreign policy, and they're like, "Hello, who is this?" Nobody's called us in a number of years. Like, we should really hire a few people here. And those are the things that we should, those are the things that I want to be talking about. Those are the victory laps that I want to be running in the world on this country, because it is the greatest place on earth, and sometimes it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's almost like the way I describe it is, when you're growing up, at least this is the case for me, I can only speak for me, insecurity becomes a big issue, and you can get like all wondering about who am I, and like, am I going to be able to achieve the things I want to in life, blah, 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 blah. But that insecurity is actually the thing that is holding you back, right? You see when you get past it that really you were always the same person. It was just you doubted yourself so deeply. And I feel like Canada has a severe insecurity problem.
It's the breakout of the shell mode. And you know what? I in my lifetime in government, we had that at various points in history. Like, I'm sort of in my late 30s, so let's count Mulrooney in there. And there was some bright lights throughout history where we were the talk of the town, i.e. the talk of the world.
Apartheid.
For sure. And frankly, the attraction of so many people that want to come to Canada and make it home speaks volumes to, what we can offer. And so thinking about sort of, who comes here, what kind of people that we're attracting, how many we're letting in to help us build our workforce. And I'm not under any illusion that, that it's easy, or that it's going to be fixed overnight, or that my situation is akin to all other Canadian situations. There are people that are struggling. There are tons more this year than there were last year. There is institutional racism, institutional anti-Semitism that holds back certain communities. Those are the things we have to look at as well.
Yes. There's nothing that I despise more than people who dislike other people simply because they believe something else. It's, as far as I'm concerned, though, that is an unacceptable behavior.
No, certainly not. It's certainly un-Canadian, but it goes worse. It gets worse than that. If you don't like something and it was brought forward by, a cultural group, you're automatically somehow painted as a racist. If you don't like environmental policy, you're a climate change denier. So we've got to stop some of this stuff as well. And it's being, it's being peddled, frankly, by the mainstream. We've got to be comfortable about talking about conservative values. We've got to fight off, whatever you want to call it, cancel culture. We can't make pariahs out of religious leaders. We've embraced them throughout our entire history. And I don't know why, all of a sudden it's 2020 and we've stopped.
Yeah. I had Waleed Solomon on, I don't know if you, but we talked about the difference between faith and religion. And I think that's a key, right? Is a person of faith is someone who is striving to love others and to live the best life they possibly can. A person of religion is about rules, right? They're trying to create a system of rules. What I've always appreciated about the Jewish faith is that it's not an evangelistic faith, right? So you're not trying to force, the Jewish people are not trying to force other people to be like them, right? It's like, well, this is what I believe. And there's a huge beauty to that I think is lost in certain elements of Islam and Christianity on the religious side. But the point that I wanted to make there is faith has always been our answer to meaning. Right? Humanity's answer to meaning has always been faith. And Tolstoy, he goes through his whole confession. He's like, his conclusion is, where there is life, there is faith. And I was wondering if you could touch on just that role that faith has played in your life. Not to try to convince other people that they need to have faith, but just to share how it's perhaps helped you overcome things.
Absolutely. And, I would add something to that. And it's, it's something that I was brought into, and it's values.
Yes.
Values household where no matter sort of what the conversation was, there was never a conversation that was too difficult. But we always understood sort of where we came down on it as a family based on the, on the values that we learned, in the Jewish faith. I would also add that we don't talk about the joy that religion and faith, bring to so many. The fabric that lines our institutions, but our families, and somehow we've shied away from faith and from religion, thinking that it was, that it was bad and it was destructive because, we see it we often see it highlighted in sort of its worst iteration. And we shouldn't be shy about talking about the things that shaped you, whether it was, the journey on how you got to Canada, the journey on how you went from, small town to PM's Plain, the journey where churches and synagogues and mosques helped you along the way, to be a part of Canada, to make you feel comfortable, and to drive sort of very important parts of your life. We should have that conversation. It's not a bad thing, and it's been made to be a bad thing.
It really has. And I was just on the O'Toole for Prime Minister Facebook page talking to a few people there, and one of the things that I noticed that I found so appalling was there was this post about how Derek Sloan was trying to impose, and I don't want to talk about Derek Sloan, but the point I wanted to make was there were a bunch of Christians on there who were feeling like they were being attacked because people were saying, well, we don't want religion in politics. And we don't want religion dictating our laws. but we should definitely have people of faith in politics.
For sure. I'll go further. I mean, we don't want politics in religion either.
Yes.
The government shouldn't tell you, what you could and what you can and cannot say to your congregation. I mean, that's a tenet of this country. Religious freedom, aside, away from, government policy sort of dictating, what you can do and what you can say is something that should be celebrated. And I get that, people don't necessarily see themselves in Mr. Sloan. He's not the voice of, at least from my experience, the social conservative part of.
No, he's definitely not. He's not. I wrote a whole article on this where I'm like, guys, this is your leader. Like, I grew up social conservative. I wouldn't say that I necessarily am anymore from a policy perspective. Obviously, the values that my parents raised me with are the things that matter to me. But to think that such a beautiful tradition, which is a tradition of faith, of public service, of rule of law, like these are the things that people of faith have given us through public policy, right? And to think that Derek Sloan is somehow the leader of this, has carrying the mantle of this tradition. It's just ridiculous. But
and there's more to it that we've diminished this conversation to a litmus test. Are you for this or are you against that? And that puts you into two buckets, and we've lost the nuance in the conversation entirely.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes.
I think most people would, automatically assume, that all of the values that I hold are directly opposite of that of a social conservative. And frankly, when you're asking, are you here or are you here? That may be true, but there is so much in the middle that we have lost, and we have allowed the other side to paint this as a very simple conversation about very complex matters.
Honestly, that's leadership, is realizing that complexity is reality, right? Because Senator Housakis said this when he came on the podcast, and I absolutely loved it. He said, there's two ways to lead, hope or fear. The best way to induce fear in a population is to create the other and say, the other is your enemy. We will protect you from your enemy, but you must hate the other, right? That is essentially what fear-based politics comes down to. Trump was a master of it. I argue Trudeau is also a master of it. Divide and conquer, right? Make people afraid of one another, and they will. And if you make the right number of people demographically afraid of the right other group of people, you'll win. But I think there's another way, and I think that's the way of hope, where we actually provide a vision. We say, hey, if we work hard, we can accomplish anything we want. Like, Elon Musk is nothing more but a dealer in hope, right? We're going to get off this planet. Humanity's going to settle the stars. And people are like, oh, he's crazy. And now 3 years from now, the first Mars landing is going to occur, right?
And then he does it. Look, this makes me think of it. I often say this, and people sort of raise an eyebrow, is that not everybody hates Justin Trudeau as much as conservatives do.
Yeah.
And we've got to remember, if we're talking about our party and our movement and the future of it, it's not enough to say, like, those guys are bad, we are good. We've got to give people the why. And I think that's what this podcast does. I think it's what all of, your conversations do. We've got to give them the vision, the hope, the opportunity, the how to get ahead on, in a very real way. Because it's not enough to say the other guy is.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. I think that's where our movement has failed. Our movement has assumed, this is a great point. I want everyone to rewind and listen to what Melissa just said. Our movement spends all its time attacking Trudeau. And the truth of the matter is, people have heard it all. They know who Trudeau is. The Canadian people are not deceived to the ineptitude of Justin Trudeau. They just like him more than us. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is introduce Canadians to conservatives. We're not a monolith. We're a very complex tribe. We're probably the most quote unquote diverse tribe in the country. And I love the people that make up our party. It's family to me. I know you probably feel the same way. When I go to convention, it's like my Burning Man. I'm so happy. I love seeing everyone, right? And they're different. It's not a bunch of old white men.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think that we are right on policy, and we'll have a bit of disagreement on sort of where we go and how we get there. But where we often lose the mark, or where we don't hit it, is not only message but tone. So they know that we are fantastic at making sure that the dollars and cents are counted and the ledgers are even, and we're accountants, almost so much so as black-hearted accountants.
Well, one of our greatest prime ministers was an economist, right? That's who we are.
What they don't know about us is, the compassion, the care, the openness. Those are the things that
the volunteering, the volunteerism, the hunters, the farmers, the people who love the land. Like, there is no one, I don't care whether, your whole life is dedicated to environmentalism, you don't love the land as much as a farmer does. Right? You know what I mean? Like, I people will probably disagree with me on that, but to truly love something is to be with it and to understand it. So Conservative Party, you and I have basically dedicated our lives to this one thing, this one idea, which is the way that I describe it to people is, we might be wrong on some things, but what we care about is common sense. What we care about is things making sense. And the big problem, I love what you said about accountants, because this is something I say all the time. The big problem with conservatives is we think that people think in facts. We think that facts are what govern, because it's what governs our lives. We, generally speaking, conservatives are really obsessed with facts.
Facts, numbers. We miss the part where there's emotion. And there has to be more to it. Like, it has to be backed up in facts. We've got a better way of getting to the finish line. I don't think that we're wrong on policy, but I do think that we're wrong on tone sometimes.
Yeah. I love that.
There's different facets to this party, and like I said at the beginning of this podcast, there's no other party that respects and values and has the tough conversations and the disagreements in the room like this party does. We do not shut down debate. We do not kick the hard questions to the courts. We don't say let's just not talk about this until the election. We duke it out, and that's what makes it stronger.
Well, that, and not only that, having different people in the room, because there's very few rooms that are as lacking in diversity as the Liberal caucus.
I think there's people that are going to argue with you on that.
Yeah.
I think you're right, and I think you're right, and I saw this sort of coming to Ottawa. I'm from a big city. Thornhill is a suburb of Toronto for those of you who don't know it, but it's a stone's throw away. So most of our lives were centered around things in the big city. And my perception of life was entirely rooted in that. And then not until I went to Ottawa, and this could speak to a sheltered lifestyle that I lived, did I meet anybody in the military. Did I meet anybody who, farmed land with their own hands?
Yep.
People that were, 9 hours away from an airport. And when we talk about diversity, we sort of put these labels on it, like it has to be somebody who's racialized, or it has to be somebody in gender. But there are so many different facets to Canadian life that all sort of come together in the political process, and particularly in the Conservative Party. And some might have louder voices than others. But that was an awakening for me when I went to Ottawa. I was one of the people that went from a bigger place to a smaller place, and I think that was the exact opposite for most of.
Well, for me, yes, it was definitely the exact opposite. But I loved meeting people like yourself. So many new friends from Quebec. Like when I was growing up in Alberta, Quebec was not a place that you talked about fondly, and now I love Quebec. And I love the Quebecois. And I actually feel a deep kinship to them, even though I'm not articulate in their language as I'd like to be yet. But I love that, and I want to dig into it a little bit more. What happened when you met these people that were completely foreign to you? How did that shape how you think about things?
Well, you certainly, all of a sudden it opens up your viewpoint. I think it's always dangerous to make policy in a vacuum. I think it's always dangerous to put a whole bunch of people from downtown Toronto or downtown Montreal or downtown Vancouver and decide what is best for rural Canada. And that's oftentimes what I think you see in the other party. And from our side, I think having a good mix of frankly everyone from across the country, having those voices from our bigger cities, it makes policy stronger, right? Like there is something to the idea that our corporate boards and our banks and all of that, celebrate diversity, and it's not necessarily all virtue signaling, although some of it is. It's better for business. It creates better outcomes.
Well, it just opens up more markets, right? It's just better to have a difference of opinion. But the problem, I've never understood this, and this is probably going to be one of the journeys I go on philosophically, but I don't understand why humans are so afraid of the unknown.
Oh, well, do we have another 4 hours?
It's just like they're afraid of things they don't understand. And I was definitely that way, but I think that fear dies pretty quickly when you realize that the unknown is just different. It doesn't mean it's bad. And in fact, the unknown is where you find the real treasures, or
your real beliefs. It always takes somebody to push you in a direction that might push your comfort zone a little bit, to get you to think about something that maybe you grew up believing, or maybe you just thought was the only way. That's what politics did for me in terms of the friends that I'd made along the way, the people that I had the honor of working for. There were real conversations about difficult issues that pushed me to question, why I believed what I believe. And that's that's the beauty of getting to work in this, because you're always having an intellectual conversation, and you're always sort of pushing your own limits on, why is it that you think what you think?
Yeah. And people joke, politics is so scummy and dirty business. There is nothing else no industry I would rather be in. Right? There's nothing more stimulating in my mind than asking every important question possible of everyone, which is really what politics is. It's like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What if we did it this way? What if we did it that way?
I think, just to give your listeners sort of a peek in, the absolute sort of best thing about being, a staffer in a big government, in a national government like Ottawa, is that there was never any question that somebody frankly couldn't answer for.
Yeah, right.
You got access to some of the brightest minds who sort of study this issue. You had access to the best pieces of information that they called, short briefs, that were neither short nor brief, but you had it.
Yes, yeah.
And you can make a determination on good data, and as a result, it was, it sometimes produced sound decision making. Sometimes it produced, politically expedient decision making.
Yes.
But sometimes it produced better outcomes for more people. And there's no job where you can have, tremendous impact so young on so many people to live a better life in this country.
No. I mean, anyone who wants to make politics a career, contact myself or Melissa. even if you're a liberal, I have liberal and NDP friends I can connect you with. Like, but to be able to participate in the process like we can in Canada, as you said near the beginning, is I think it's one of the greatest things about this country is opportunity, and maybe the greatest opportunity in our country is how open our political system is. So we only got 5 more minutes left. Just been absolutely lovely having you on. Just really enjoyed it. But what do you want to say? What would you like to conclude to the listeners about where the conservative movement is going? Maybe even the role that you would like to play in it in terms of ideas. Like where are we headed?
Well, look, we talked a little bit about this, but just to summarize it, we've got to be the party of ideas. It's not going to be enough to say that those guys are bad and we're good and you should just give us a chance. We've got to grow this movement. We've got to make it so it isn't a bad word to say that you're a conservative on university campuses today, or, frankly, even before that. We've got to celebrate the fact that there are conservative solutions to the very real new problems that we're about to face, or that we don't even know we're going to face that. And we've got to speak to a broader section of the population. We've got to speak to young people. We've got to speak to women. We've got to speak to new Canadians. And I think with sort of a vision and a look at to what Canada is going to be in 2050 and not 2022. That's where I think we have the opportunity to set the groundwork, to have that conversation and to get people excited about being a part of this country and all it has to offer, and make sure that it has to offer all of those things in the future as it did in the past.
Thank you. That's a perfect summation. And I'd love to have you on again, maybe after your nomination is done, to talk about
hopefully I win.
Well, I have a lot of faith in both yourself and the people running your campaign. So let's hope you win. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I hope everyone listens very carefully to what Melissa had to say, because I think the future of our movement is in the balance right now on which way are we going to go. Are we going to become people who include and have vision, or are we going to become destroyers and critics? And I think we should become builders.
That's a good way to put it. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.